September 16th, 1997, Montreal. A day before starting out on a cross-Canada book promotion tour, the omens are bad. Striding down Crescent Street, late in the afternoon, bound for my favored watering hole, I am stopped by a gentleman from Vancouver. "Aren't you Mordecai Richler?" "Yes," I said. "Let me shake your hand," he said. "I've read everything you've written. I think you're wonderful." "Well, thank you," I said. "Now," he said, "let me ask you a question. What do you do for a living?" Then there was a letter from a college in Hamilton, Ontario, inviting me to speak. And it began, "Your book, The Apprenticeship of Diddy Kravitz, has long been a fixture in our English classes. Students are amazed to discover that you are still alive." September 17th, Toronto. In town to deliver the Donner Foundation lecture, I first submit to lunch with Miss Yan Wong, a Globe and Mail columnist. "How tall are you?" she asks. 5'8", I say, startled. "And how tall is your wife?" "Why do you want to know?" I asked. "I need to describe you," she said. Pursuing her literary inquiries, she asks if our children are getting a Jewish education. Married to a Jew herself, she allows, with a self-satisfied smile, "We have a Seder every Friday night." "That must be a Jewish-Chinese custom," I say. We manage it only once a year on Passover. There's a 6-page fax waiting for me back in my hotel room. It's from Knopf, Canada. A list of interviews, readings, and book signings I'm to do across Canada. I've been wary of morning show TV interviewers ever since one of those relentlessly cheerful young women squeezed me in for a couple of minutes between a cooking demonstration and a chat with a spiritual healer. Brandishing my novel, she demanded, "Is this a true story, or did you just make it up out of your head?" Publication wasn't always such an ordeal. When I was a young writer rooted in London, I would deliver my manuscript to my publisher. Then when my novel came out 9 months later, I would sit at home waiting for cherished friends to phone and read aloud my worst review just in case I'd missed it. Those were the days when novelists could be condescending about traveling salesmen, men who lugged their sample cases from town to town. But we have long since joined the club. Last time out in New York, I was driven in a limo from bookshop to bookshop, popping in to sign copies of my novel, preceded and followed by other writers and other limos signing theirs. Bookshops can return unsold copies of a book to the publishers, but they can't refund those that are autographed. So the publisher's flack who accompanies authors on these excursions usually says something like, "I'll chat up the sales staff, and while they aren't looking, you sign as many goddamn copies as possible." Now that I'm an aging pro, somebody who's been around the block possibly once too often, I don't make rookie mistakes. I will, for instance, no longer do radio or TV call-in shows. Once, at a late-night call-in show in Chicago, I sat round a table with 2 other writers. We watched, astonished, as the technician in the control booth rapped on his glass window and held up a message for our host. "Remember, Dave," it read, "this is the night of the full moon." When my turn to sell came, I went on as required about how hell is a blank sheet of paper and so forth and so on. Then a listener finally addressed a question to me. All that's well and good, Richler, but I live on the north side, and I want to know how come there was no garbage collection this week. Back in Montreal on October 5th, time to check out a week's mail. A professor at an Ontario university is writing a paper on minor novelists and wants me to answer 26 questions. An eyeglass museum in Tennessee would like a pair of my old spectacles. An invitation to lecture begins, "We are a nonprofit society," and I read no further. October 6th, Toronto again, more TV, radio, and press interviews, followed by an evening reading at the University of Toronto's Convocation Hall. Afterward, at the book signing, I am confronted by a hostile young woman. "I read your last novel," she said. "Solomon Gursky was here. It took me 2 years. What a struggle." October the 18th, Victoria, Vancouver Island. Midway through my reading at the Open Space Gallery, the microphone begins to leak music from a local rock station. First time I perform with the backup group. Vancouver, interview with a woman from the Western Jewish Bulletin. She wants to know, speaking frankly, is it true that I'm an anti-Semite? I tell her a story, possibly apocryphal, that was first told to me by a Hollywood film director. Years ago, young Daniel Fuchs, a gifted novelist and short story writer, was hired to work on a screenplay in Hollywood with his idol, William Faulkner. Faulkner, a sensible man, did not suffer Hollywood easily. He was drunk most of the time. Following a difficult couple of weeks, the sensitive young Fuchs said, "Mr. Faulkner, this collaboration is not working." Faulkner agreed that was the case. "It's not working," said Fuchs, "because you're an anti-Semite." "Yes," said Faulkner, "but I don't like Gentiles either." October 23rd. Montreal, home at last, but late in January, I will have to set out again, this time on my American book peddling tour. Last time out, I remember staggering off a plane in Seattle, having already been overnight in 6 other cities. The minder who met me eyed me suspiciously. "Have you been drinking?" she asked. "Certainly not," I said. "But I wouldn't mind if we stopped somewhere before my first interview." "We can't do that," she said. "Your first interviewer is a Mormon." "They all are," I said. Back in the early 50s in London, I used to drink occasionally with the poet Louis MacNeice in a pub around the corner from the BBC. He told me that back in the 40s, he had been to lecture in Montreal. 2 nice club ladies met him at the airport. "I'd like to stop for a drink first," said MacNeice. "Oh, you mustn't worry, Mr. MacNeice. We'll be serving tea at the hall." "I mean a drink, he said. So they stopped at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, he told me, and waited for him in the car outside. "You'll find what you need in there," they said. So it goes. Thanks very much.